I suppose we can just get started, and then if people just join in whenever, that's cool. But otherwise, we'll just share the recording after this. I think that's gonna get the most coverage either way. So, yeah, thanks for joining, guys. I first of all wanted to clarify a certain couple of things regarding the alpha benefits. So first of all, the password is truth seeker with an S on the end and double three. So it's actually the name of this group chat, truth seekers, right? So it's all small letters. So after this call, if you hadn't opened the file yet, you can do so after this call, and you can actually go and sorry, you can actually go and look at all of the exact benefits, but I will just talk about them briefly here. So first of all, I'm very happy to offer everybody in this group a 30 million token pool. That's going to be a airdrop. So this is going to be distributed according to two different sets of rules. The first set of rules is that 50% of that pool, so that means 15 million token, is going to be equally distributed via this pre-TGE portal, where you can use your Telegram handle to verify whether you were actually in the group, and you can use that then to claim these tokens. And then additionally, there's going to be 50% of this pool, so another 15 million tokens, which are going to be rewarded based off the active contribution. What I mean with active contribution is that we are tracking metrics based on engagement, based on the roll-up news usage, and the type of posts that you roll up and threads that you roll up. And with the next update of Rollup News, we're going to have a dashboard, and we're going to have a landing page, not a landing page, a home page with a whole bunch of cool upgrades and so on. But more importantly, there's going to be a way where you can track your points and your score, and that is already being tracked. Reaper, we can see your video, by the way, and we can hear your microphone. I'm not sure you intended to do that. We see you outside. Maybe you should. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so your amount of rollups requested already is tracking, so you're able to build your points already. So the more rollups you create, the better your score will be. The higher your score will be, the more of this pool you'll be able to claim once we go TGE. So active contribution, and there will be different types of contribution along the way, but for now we're going to focus on rollup news. Once the agent builder is live, then it's also going to be regarding how many agents and how many clusters and how many swarms you've joined and so on. So that's about the exclusive um, um, like 30 million token pool for just exclusively for our group. I want to note that there is going to be additional airdrop mechanisms that the public will have access to. So you can also participate in that. So it's not just that, okay, you can participate and you can build your points and you can um, get get this token pool, but there's going to be a larger token pool for the public to get involved as well, which you can also participate in. However, I wanted to make sure that everybody is duly rewarded for their support, because I couldn't have done this without you guys here in this group. Hence, there's this exclusive pool for the Alpha group. So that's the first benefit. The second benefit is ongoing direct line to the core team, which means that you get priority access to the team members that are all part of this group. You can ask questions to us directly. You can share your feedback, and you will have dedicated support channels, which I am one of those support channels, to help you answer questions and to help you make sure that everything is clear. There's no FUD. So then you will be able to get your early access to all of the products that we are testing and that we are building, which also means the agent builder. That was part of the promise of agent licenses. However, maybe a few people that are in the group, they don't actually have an agent license. I still want to be able to give those people access to the builder as well. However, if you do not have an agent license, you will have limited access, but you can still get a preview. So then once the builder goes live, then obviously you just need to get an agent license to get the full access. You will also be able to influence the future development of the product through actively participating and giving us feedback. You guys are our first line of feedback, essentially. So then the Truth Swarm and agent license opportunities. So we open um, we open um, we open the cluster creation process for the Truth Swarm. So anybody that wants to create a cluster, they can add that cluster to the Truth Swarm in the very beginning, in the very soon. Um, Essentially, like once we give out the early access, you'll be able to create clusters and you'll be able to add them to the Truth Swarm. What that will get you is related to the fifth point, which is like additional 5% token supply of the Truth Swarm for contributor rewards as well. So to clarify this, and I'm sure it was in one of the questions, we'll go over it probably again in a little bit, but each swarm that is created on our platform will be able, but does not have to, but will be able to launch its own token. So that means that the Truth Swarm, which is now servicing Rollup News, will be able to launch its own token. And that process is actually done by the foundation, so by us, by myself and the team. And that 5% additional token supply that we earmarked for the cluster operators is going to be something that is going to be pretty nice, because not now I'm saying you're not just going to get Swarm tokens because you are an agent license holder and you're accessing the exclusive airdrop, but additionally, if you do decide to early on build a cluster that is going to be added to the Truth Swarm, so then you can also get access to that additional token supply. So once that asset is launched, once the Truth Swarm is launched after our main token TGE, you'll be able to get maybe even a significant portion of that supply, and that will be worth something too. There are going to be different mechanisms for unlocking those tokens, which also will include staking. But those full details I will publish once we do segue into the early hands-on stage of the agent builder and the cluster builder. So I hope that you all saw the video that I posted, where I'm showing you the early stage of the product, where you can describe your cluster and it can be generated for you, so up to 100 agents. So what we're asking you to do is very simple, is create a cluster that has some function within the Truth Swarm. So you all understand Rollup News, that's one of the first applications that's powered by the Truth Swarm and by our entire Swarm stack. So if you can build something that is going to be able to service that purpose, right, the purpose of combating misinformation and verifying information for X and other social medias, then by default you'll be able to add that cluster to the Swarm. And if that cluster happens to be a cluster that is used a lot, then you're going to be able to get access to that token supply in a significant way. So obviously there's going to be a lot of support from our side once that starts to happen. Once you start to be able to prompt your own clusters, we will give you relatively okay directions. I don't want to box you in or something. I don't want to say, hey, you need to build this or you need to build that, but I will be able to give you certain directions or certain ideas. And then, obviously it's also so that if you want to build, for example, like on the consensus aspect, then it doesn't matter how many copies there are of a certain cluster or a certain function, because we don't need just one agent to find consensus. We need a consortium of agents to find consensus and so on. So don't worry that it's going to be really complicated or something like that. It's really not going to be complicated, and I'll personally be here to assist you guys through this process. But what I do want to iterate here is that this is a really important aspect of our ecosystem, because Truth Swarm is just the first swarm that we're launching, right? Like that's just the first base that's powered by the foundation. But I would love it like I said previously, to be that, I mean, like the process to be in such a way that everybody in this alpha group eventually launches their own swarm and there's also their own token. So learn from the process and don't be shy to ask questions and really get into it. Again, everything will be no code. And, like if we can create some kind of like a flywheel here where we are building swarms that are actually doing something good in the world, then those assets will appreciate. And if we can stick together and build this thing out together, then I think everybody's going to be benefiting off those token launches in the future too. So don't just focus on one of the assets, right? So don't just think that there's only going to be Swarm, our main token, but also understand that there's going to be the swarms that are going to be launched through the platform, which are going to be important too. So that is what I wanted to share before we get into the questions um, about the benefits. If you guys, for those that are on the call right now, if you have any questions regarding the benefits, feel free to unmute and ask me right now before I jump into the list of questions that we have.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I forwarded the questions that were asked by the people in the chat, so they're all right there at the very bottom of the chat for you to see as well.
Yeah, cool. All right, then I will just get into the questions. So I will go from the last one that you forwarded all the way to the first one. And I think there was a question from Jen as well. Okay, I see it. Yeah. And then I see there was another, I think there was another question, no, Joshua, by this other guy.
I forwarded
Let's
all
see.
the ones that I could find. I'm pretty sure those were all the questions that are
Okay.
forwarded
All
there.
right. Okay, cool. I'll start with the first one. I see a lot of AI marketing agents out there, from CRM to ones that cold call or SDR, etc. Anyone planning on using a Swarm to be full dedicated marketing team? Is that possible? Good idea. Everyone's gonna need eyes on their clusters. Yeah, I mean, so one of the developments which is cool, which is the MCP, which we also touched on in the X space just now, um, makes it really easy for us to integrate with any kind of client-side application. So if you have like a CRM that you use for your business, or maybe like I don't know, maybe some kind of like a cold outreach platform or an emailing platform like Instantly.ai, something like this. Like it will be super easy for us to integrate with these kind of services if they, on their client side, allow for integration on MCP level. So this MCP thing, which has been pretty hyped last week, and I think still this week, it's relatively um, relatively discussed, which is funny if you think about it. It's like the AI news is spreading just as fast as like Web3 news. These cycles are so quick. It's very funny to see. But anyways, yeah, it's possible. It's just a matter of being able to integrate with the proper with the proper clients essentially. And then again, like you have to think about market fit too, right? Like who are you building this for? Is it just for your sole purpose? Then you could probably do with a cluster, right? You don't actually have to go the full mile and build a whole swarm around it. Probably if you just have a cluster, then it would do. So maybe it's also important for me to explain a little bit about what the difference between a cluster and a swarm is, and I will do so in more depth in an article or blog post that we're writing. But so a cluster is a subunit of a swarm. So a cluster is comprised of multiple agents. There can be up to 100 agents, and a cluster can be part of a swarm. So let's say if you add 100 clusters to a swarm, you have a pretty sizable swarm. Then the swarm can launch a token. A cluster cannot launch a token. A swarm can initially we'll have to build those integrations, but maybe we can use MCP even. But it can serve as a middleware layer where the outputs are structured in a certain way that applications can read them. So you can think of it as a certain type of business logic, right? So your swarm has an input, and an output which is structured, and then within the swarm there's all these clusters that actually do the work. So if you want to build something for yourself, for example, regarding like marketing related activities or purposes, then you can probably just create a cluster. You don't have to go the full mile to create a swarm. So Howie has another question, which is, so say we create a solution for business and have to market and network, and people ask about past projects or proof of success credibility. Can we leverage Swarm if we have one of our licenses helping support it? Or what's a good way to go about things like this? Oh, that's a tricky question. Um, because it depends what you're building, right? So, I mean, like if you're going to build a cluster or a swarm that is going to tell jokes, like probably leveraging, like Swarm as a project is not going to be really beneficial, but you can potentially leverage some information about like the technology and its reputation, probably. That's probably possible. So yeah, I'm I'm not sure, um, Christopher. I just muted you and unmuted you because we could hear your microphone, by the way. But if you want to speak, you can speak later. Yeah. So to get back to the point, yeah, it depends, man. It really depends on what you're building. But you can always leverage like Swarm's technology, saying that, hey, look, this is proper, like here's our GitHub, like here's how it works. You can be sure that there's no, fishy things going on technical level, I suppose. But then again, like if you build something really niche and you want to market it, then I think it's going to be uh, an interplay between you marketing it and then also using our marketplace to find, I guess, potential people that are interested in that product. And I will say product, I mean Swarm, but I want you to get used to thinking that your Swarm is actually like a product, right? Like you have to really think about it from a product perspective. So from Jen, looking forward to seeing the recording of the upcoming AMA. Here are my questions. Question number one. The 30 million tokens for the Alpha Group airdrop and the 5% of Truth Swarm, which token allocation category are these coming from? Is this the Omega airdrop mentioned on the Q2 roadmap? These tokens are coming from the airdrop, the 2% that we have earmarked. And there's going to be probably a little bit more going to be allocated from the community treasury. But we will pre-TGE we will define this a little bit better and publish this for transparency reasons. Question number two. And yes, indeed, the Omega airdrop is going to be part of this. So tell us more about the Telegram handle verification and active contributor rewards, engagement metrics to get involved. When does this start or has it already? This is what Questing Platform in the Q1 roadmap is about. Yes, correct. So at the end of this month, we will publish the new version of Rollup News. That comes with a leaderboard. That leaderboard is a points-based leaderboard where you will be rewarded points directly to your Twitter handle. Your Twitter handle is associated with the points that you accumulate, so it's a public leaderboard. So the more rollups you do, the more points you will get, and then later you can use your Twitter profile to claim these points pre-TG, and they will be converted to an airdrop. So indeed, that's the questing platform that was mentioned on the Q1 roadmap. And question number 3 is Agent Builder still slated for Q3? Yes, correct. Number 4, any changes to your TGE plans for Q2? Just around the corner based on market uncertainty created by Trump. As of now, we don't have any, we're not thinking of delaying. I'm actually very bullish for the market to see some, uptick in the very near future, say in the next couple of weeks. I might be a little bit biased, I don't know, but yeah, I'm definitely like almost certain that it's going to be Q2. again, unless there's some really, really crazy black swan event. But I think that, like us getting the token out there is one thing. Um, and of course, it has to be in a good market. And of course, like there has to be the potential for the market to be able to pick up the token and natural liquidity inflow, natural volumes, um, like not to strain the treasury too much. And then there has to be this wave after that. But it's a two-stage process. It's like getting your token out there and then riding the wave once it arrives is one strategy, right? So yeah, I think it's going to be fine. We're in um, in communication with exchanges. We're in communication with market makers. So yeah, everything is on track. Number 5, when and how can we hook our licenses up to work for the Truth Swarm? Is the plan to enable this while we wait for the builder to do our own projects? Yes, correct. So this plan might change. However, what we have planned right now is that we will publish a simple version of the agent builder, or maybe like you could say redacted version, or pre-alpha version, or something like that. Sorry, the pre-alpha version where you can build clusters specifically for the Truth Swarm. You can build clusters or agents. It doesn't have to be a cluster; it can also be an agent. And then you can one-click deploy those clusters and agents into the swarm. So yeah, so that's gonna be essentially, okay, we have one swarm out there. You can build a cluster, you can add the cluster to the swarm, and then that's already running, right? Because we already have our clusters and our agents running within that construct, within the swarm, and that's what's powering Rollup News, and we've greatly enhanced it for this upcoming version. It's going to be really cool. It has like a homepage. You can see the latest roll-ups. You can browse by topics. You can search. There's some relationship going on and tagging going on between topics and people and all of this stuff. And then the UI UX is revamped. There's like deep reasoning. You can choose different clusters that we've made to re-verify or try and dig deeper. And then there's going to be either an editor mode or an infra I'm sorry, an X-ray, not infra, an X-ray mode, where you can actually see what's going on a more technical / deeper level in terms of, hey, what are the sources? How does the cluster reason through the sources? How many agents were involved, and so on. So we've also done that to give you a little bit of a better understanding of how this swarm operates. Like, what are the constituents of the swarm? How do they interact with each other? What kind of data is being pulled, and so on. So give a little bit more transparency for the users as well. So not everybody is interested in it because they're going to, like, per se build swarms, but they might just be interested in the product rollup as a product itself, and they want to understand how we come to conclusions. So there's a little bit of transparency there as well. So I hope that that answers your question. But yes, you can then hook up your license. You can prompt a cluster. You can add that cluster to the Truth Swarm, and then that is going to allow you to accumulate additional points. Those points are then going to be converted eventually to this 5% stake, or like they're going to be your weight within that 5% pool. And then there's the normal economics that are going to happen on swarm level, which what I mean is, like, after that 5% of the supply is distributed, that's just an additional thing, right? So you still have the normal economics of the swarm, like who's doing the work, how many times is your cluster like prompted, or how many times does inference occur, how many times is your cluster responsible for the output, like what is its reputation, and how much are you going to earn from the potential fees, and how is those fees going to be distributed among your internal ownership structure, and so on. So that's not an end all, it's just kind of like a cherry on the cake. All right, let's go to DK Bromac. Hi, Yannick and team. 1A. Is the concept of self-evolving AGI agents with Swarm available? If so, can you? Okay, is the concept of self-evolving AI agents with Swarm available? If so, can you delve into the concept of self-evolving AGI agents within a Swarm network, touching on programming, meta-learning, and if this is possible with the current infrastructure? It is possible with the current infrastructure. What I mean is that you can prompt to create a cluster. You can prompt to edit a cluster. You can prompt to edit an agent. You can prompt to change the formation of your swarm. So how, what is the hierarchy within your swarm in terms of how are the clusters interacting with each other and so on. So yes, it's possible. However, it is far from perfect. So as soon as you start to say like, hey, okay, now we are going to have one cluster which is going to be responsible for the reprompting and reconfiguring of agents within a cluster or within a swarm, it can get pretty messy and get pretty hectic. I am a proponent of a proper symbiotic relationship between humans and AI. Why? Because in the end, we want these things to work for us, right? And we have a very specific desire or specific need that we want a cluster or a swarm to fulfill. And the parameters are probably going to be pretty defined or pretty well defined. So for example, in the case of Rollup News, what we're doing is always the same. I mean, to a certain degree. So how does that work then? Well, you always have evidence, you have claims, you have people, you have sources, you have analysis, you have rational thinking, you have consensus mechanism, you have a red team that is going to try and falsify the claims that have been verified and so on. So there's like a certain kind of hierarchy going on. There's a certain predetermined way of doing things, and we don't really want to deviate too much from that predefined structure or that predefined system, because if we do, the output is not going to be consistent with our desire, right? So in this scenario, how are we optimizing for better output? And this is actually happening right now, right? So we're working on the next version of Rollup News. It's very simple. We trace all of the information that is running through the network, this mini network, right? This swarm. What are all the different agents doing? How are they passing information? Like at what stage does what happen? And based off that track, based off us retracing all of the steps and seeing and looking at how this information is then propagated, we can create certain benchmarks. And those benchmarks are then serving as benchmark for improvements. So for example, let's say I have a objectivity versus subjectivity benchmark. Like how many times is the cluster actually able to correctly extract the objective from the subjective? We have a benchmark for this. Okay, now how are we going to improve this benchmark? Well, probably we need to fix some of the prompts, or maybe in this case, it was just fix some of the master prompts of some of the agents, so they better understand the task, right? So this can be done through like just analysis and then making the changes, and this can be done through natural language. If it's more complex, you might need to dive under the hood. In our case, we had to dive a little bit deeper, but nevertheless, it's kind of like, hey, what am I seeing? Where do I want to go? And based off that analysis, you are going to reprompt. You could automate that. Sure, you could say you have a cluster and the cluster is able to change all the system prompts of all the other agents. But again, you also need to then have like a benchmarking cluster. And then those benchmarks have to be like definitely as objective, and you probably have to define like how often you want to change things around and which things can be changed and cannot be changed. So it's not as easy as just saying like, oh, I'm going to press this button and it's going to be magic. No, it's like definitely there has to, some thought has to go into what is allowed to be changed, what isn't allowed to be changed, and what is the benchmark, and how are the outputs structured and so on. So yeah, probably not as simple as you think, but yeah, I mean, definitely possible because it's all prompt based, right? So our whole system is essentially prompt based. What that means is like you can use natural language to change all the parameters within a cluster or an agent or a swarm. So the third question is, could individual agents within the swarm spontaneously specialize in different elements of a problem based on their learnings? And could they then collaborate by sharing insights, results, and even learned architectural modifications with other agents in the given network? Again, yes, practically this is possible because um, there's not just context and there's not just benchmark, but there's also memories. And you can, so within a swarm, you can, like I said before, you can essentially create clusters with different responsibilities, right? So you could create a cluster that has some kind of like responsibility um, for upgrading certain other clusters. So yeah, they could definitely, you could definitely program in like sessions for sharing insights based off like maybe even user feedback or some kind of like feedback, right? Like improvements are always made based off feedback. So there has to be like an internal structure for receiving this feedback, like, and then it's highly case sensitive, right? Like, are you building a cluster for helping you play your video game better? Than the feedback that the cluster receives is probably you sharing some kind of like performance metrics in some MMORPG that you're playing, or like you don't have enough combat power or something like that. And then based off that feedback, maybe the agents could reorganize themselves. But again, possible, but there has to be some structure, right? There has to be some system. So like the the biggest thing about building a good swarm versus just building a swarm is like you have to think in systems, right? I remember Christoph was talking about like this chain of agents. Um, I think it was for storytelling, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
Correct,
or
correct, correct.
right? Yeah. So like if you have like a really well defined like structure, then within that structure you can obviously decide and define like parameters that have to be tracked or changed, or like you can build a logic behind how could an agent improve itself, right? So like maybe every time like an agent gets a bad score, you ask it to reassess its previous like 10 outputs, and then extrapolate that, or delineate its score from those outputs and see how it could potentially improve in its current context. So it's possible, but again, you know, probably it's gonna take some tinkering. So number four, as problems evolve and more say challenges emerge, can the swarm network dynamically allocate tasks to agents best suited to handle them at that specific time based on agent self-assessed capabilities? Example, are the better results than others solving similar problems before? Yes, correct. Yes, this is possible. And this is actually one of the cornerstones behind the multi-agent framework. So the multi-agent collaboration framework and this set of tooling and the protocol that we developed, the Truth Protocol, exactly solves this problem. So you could imagine that it's kind of like, okay, if you use like AutoGen, for example, or some swarm building framework, like it's kind of like a free for all. Like the agents, like they're kind of quasi organized, but it's pretty random. You don't really have control over like who's going to do what and why some agent is doing what in the first place, other than their prompts, their system prompts. And that poses some issues because it's not really a dynamic system. It's not really adaptable. It doesn't really evolve with its. I mean, the functionality doesn't really evolve. It's not dynamic at all. It's just like a bunch of agents pre-programmed, and they just are able to propagate information. Whereas within a swarm, you actually have things like reputation. You actually have things like this. You could call it descriptions or meta descriptions or metadata that defines um, the purpose of an agent or a cluster or swarm. And then there's this topological search that's happening whenever a swarm receives a request, depending again on what is input versus output, like how is this structured. But let's say hypothetically there's no structure in input output, it's just text based. So then what happens is the shortest and the um, most the potentially better yielding path is established. So there's a certain mechanism that says, hey, this path and its probability of success and accuracy is like this percentage. Here are all the other ones. Like which ones do you want to choose? Maybe we choose three and we see what's the better outcome. So yes, it is very dynamic, and it's also like a swarm is also, for example, able to retire a certain cluster or a certain agent, right? So, like based off a reputation score, you can imagine that if your agent or your cluster, um, like multiple times does not perform, or inference fails, or the output is just completely gibberish, reputation score will go down and it will be much harder to receive a task. Depending also on like how well populated is a swarm. Look, if you have a swarm and like there's only a few clusters, then like each of the clusters is obviously going to have to do more work, right? Maybe they even have to do work which they're not specifically created for. The larger your swarm is, the more dynamic and the more larger the search space becomes for the best route as well. But yeah, again, the agent collaboration framework, one of the key issues that it actually solves is the efficient collaboration between agents and clusters within a swarm to yield the most probabilistically um, like highest quality, sorry, result. Yeah, that's how I would describe it. So then question number 5 is it conceivable that the interaction of these self-evolving agents could lead to the birth of a new and unexpected problem-solving strategy that might not yet have been even conceived by you guys or any humans for that matter? Interesting. I think so. I think so because like have these reasoning models and you don't really know how the reasoning process is established in the first place, right? Again, obviously, it's just like calculating tokens, right? It's just a mathematical equation in the end. It's a process of probabilistic. Um, it's like a probabilities in simple terms. What is the probability of this next token being the token that should follow up the previous token? That's how it works. But yeah, now you can imagine that there's like a bunch of reasoning agents, or maybe 100 reasoning agents, all working on a problem, and they will probably find very interesting ways to solve these problems. What we have seen, which is very interesting, very, very interesting in my opinion, is that once we start to make larger swarms, there are either subsets of clusters that start to um, interact with each other in made up languages. So they start to talk in weird, just text strings and languages, and they, yeah, it's very weird. Like there was this one occasion where we created a large swarm, and they just started to talk with each other in different language, which didn't really make sense. And sometimes you see in the reasoning models as well where they reason, like they use some randomly, R1 starts to reason in Chinese and then in French and then brings it back into English. It's very interesting. So yes, that could definitely lead to some curious and peculiar um, strategies for solving problems, for sure. Question number 6, if an agent in the swarm encounters an issue or simply becomes less efficient, can the other agents in the swarm continue working on the problem, potentially taking over and filling the gap in that agent's expertise? Yes, correct. So your reputation score, or not your reputation score, the agent's or cluster's reputation score tackles one part of this. And then also um, the reputation score is then tied up to the rewards function. So if your agent is not capable to generate an output or contribute to an output, or is maybe even damaging an output or hampering an output, then the reward function will be maybe even negative. So yes, so maybe your agent will not be called upon, and maybe other agents will do the work, and then those agents will be rewarded for doing the work. So that is the dynamic. That is the part which you also will not have so much control over, because it's like the reasoning is done by the agents that are responsible for the reasoning within the swarm. Number seven, can we discuss how the developers who will be available through the marketplace will be screened? Um, Also a good question. For now, it's, like our top priority is essentially going to be integrating with the most used tooling first. And now that we have MCP, it's going to be much easier. So, like verified businesses, for example, verified projects and so on, like they will be screened by us. There's like obviously a good due diligence process, and uh, we are creating a system where the more serious the integration becomes, right? Like the more, let's say, like DeFi related it becomes, the harder the due diligence will be, the stricter the contract and so on. But in the beginning, this is going to be purely managed by us internally, and then later on, if it's more open source, then there has to be some kind of like principle or protocol that minimizes the risk for users. But then in the end, it's always going to be, like it's definitely going to be your responsibility as a user as well, because it's open source, right? Like we don't want to really limit people to build stuff. We want to limit potential harm, but yeah, like there might be some issues sometimes. Who knows, right? Just like make sure that you understand like what you're using, and not randomly to give your keys or something like that to some random tool. And then, yeah, like the best way you could go about this is just only use the tools that we verify. That's for sure. How will we know the developer's true potential and their level of understanding to the depth and knowledge of the Swarm team in understanding the Swarm infrastructure and how to program to get the best out of it? Will the developers be working with a team so that when they go to solve problems, understand also where the teams are headed directingly in terms of new releases, etc.? How will this relationship work? Um, I'm not sure if I really understand this question correctly, but I suppose that you're trying to ask how you could potentially use external developers to build your swarm. That's definitely going to be on you to assess their capabilities. If you're talking about the tooling that's going to be available, then yeah, I mean, like the verification system for the tool is a potentially useful way for you to be able to verify whether a tool is good to be used and safe. Yeah, I'm not really sure what this question really means in what context. Maybe you can clarify it after this session, and I can answer it in text. 9. Can you please go deeper into the Swarm token and how its utility will help holders? What advantages will it yield, and how will they be beneficial as opposed to someone who sells their tokens on launch? Yeah, I don't want to go too deep into it because there's a bunch of stuff written in the Git book already, but what I do want to say is that you need Swarm tokens to be able to operate and to be able to get allocation of other Swarm assets that are going to be launched on the platform. Without that, it's not going to be possible. If you want to launch your Swarm and you want to have other users to buy into that Swarm, they will definitely need to use the token. So that's a very big utility that I want to focus on in the beginning. Obviously, there's such things as network fees and so on. But those network fees, they're just empty promises unless the network is really going to scale. But, like if you if you're not an agent license holder, for example, and you get into contact with the project later on, after TGE, for example, like the instant utility for you is going to be to buy the token off the market and to bring it onto the platform to be able to get tokens of other swarms, right? To like get ownership in a swarm. Let's say like, you launched your swarm and you want to distribute the ownership of that swarm to other people, and you want to build together. Now you can offer those tokens up on the platform, and other users that are new potentially, they can use swarm tokens to get that specific token that you're putting up for offering. So that is a very important part of the ecosystem which I want people to understand better. Then is the team's aspiration to use quantum assisted computing in the future? Well, who knows, man. Um, yeah, if that becomes something that people are using, then potentially, but that's still very far away, man. If we have already business concepts that we want to solve, do we need to talk to the team, or can we, once we get access, work with the developer to put it in place? You can literally just describe it and prompt and create a cluster, and you'll be good to go. 12. On a newly developed swarm, is there a way to monitor it to see if it's working correctly? I expect some human interaction is required from the offset. Correct. Yes. Again, you can define your own benchmarks, and you can test those benchmarks. That will be very cool tool that you can use to track benchmarks and to create a certain type of dashboard. So you can see exactly what your swarm is doing. You can track the quality of outputs and inputs and so on. You can make corrections and tweak based on that. There were a lot of really nice questions, by the way, DK Pro Mac. That was nice. I'm gonna scroll back a little bit into the chat because I remember that there was another question which I didn't answer. It was about the sales. Oh yeah, here it is. Hello. It was from L. Hello. We knew there's a total of 30,000 licenses available, and the strength of a Swarm network largely depends on how many licenses are sold. My question is, what happens if the necessary number of licenses isn't sold? Specifically, what would be the minimum number of active licenses required to ensure the network remains scalable and sustainable in the near future? Additionally, considering how rapidly AI technology is evolving, while we might require significantly more resources in the next 10 to 15 years, how do you plan to handle scalability in the long term? And in the worst case scenario, where a critical number of licenses isn't sold, what will be the plan B to ensure the network functionality and growth are not compromised? Interesting question and interesting take. I do not think that the strength of the network actually depends on the amount of licenses sold. I think that the network strongly depends on the amount of people that are going to want to build on on the on the tools, right? So you can rent out your licenses to other people, and the less licenses there are sold, the more demand there is, the more duplicates of your license essentially you can lease out. So yeah, so the network is not necessarily depending on the amount of licenses that are sold. The licenses are just a tool for us to have an initial community, kickstart it, and make sure that there's an initial community that understands the product, understands the network, and wants to contribute, and also can help us to onboard other users. So of course, the more we sell, the better in terms of like the treasury we build, the community we build. But even if we would only sell, like in the end, like 10,000 licenses, that's way more than enough. And the benefit for you guys is the less we sell, the more you can exploit your license, obviously. So more details about the agent license leasing will be made available at a later stage. But yeah, it's not like, oh, we need to sell all 30,000 licenses and then like the project is successful. That's not really how it works. Yeah, I think that the more important aspect is like how well can we as a community build swarms that are actually servicing the apps and applications and users so that there can be real revenue flowing through our network. That is the most important. And that all comes down to finding proper market fit. And that is also the reason why we built Rollup News and the Truth Swarm, to really drive this point home of, hey, look, we need to build something that's useful, something for which there is a good product market fit, and that we can turn a profit off, essentially. So specifically, what would be the minimum number of active licenses required to ensure the network remains scalable and sustainable in the near future? Like I said, like the scalability and the sustainability is not really dependent on the agent licenses. We could have done it without the agent license still. We just wanted to give an entry point for early adopters and core community to get on board. So I would say like a nice number would be 10,000. Really nice number would be 20,000. Perfect number would be 30,000, but definitely not necessarily to sell more than 10K, to be honest. Additionally, considering how rapidly AI technology is evolving, we might require significantly more resources in the next 10 to 15 years. Yeah, well, this is actually a misconception because the everything is getting cheaper. The technology is becoming more commoditized. Compute is more accessible. Compute itself is becoming more cheap because like the GPUs are increasingly cheaper, the chips are increasingly faster. So actually, the cost of AI technology are likely to keep decreasing, which allows us to build a bigger and bigger network with less cost, running on less cost essentially. However, I do kind of see what you're trying to say. I guess you're trying to say that it's like if you're not going to be a profitable business, then how are you going to make sure that you will survive, right? So something about Web3 companies is that we tend to raise a lot of money, but a lot of the companies tend to not really deliver and not really become profitable. But I think that that also has to do with the business model that most projects run on, which is not really so much retail focused, but our tools are very much retail focused, and we really understand well what the pain points are for people that are currently trying to get into the agent space. And I believe that we can very quickly become revenue positive and profitable. So I think that it's just a matter of reinvesting, the money that we do raise and that we do earn back into the growth of the network, and that is probably going to be mainly revolved around user acquisition, not so much in having to invest more in technology, because in the end, like our network is going to be run by the people. It's decentralized, distributed. Like we will be able to do a lot with, like even like locally run models and agents that are run in the cloud, or maybe even servers through API. So I don't really see a big issue here, but I do agree that we definitely have to keep investing, obviously, right? Like, the skill of the network um, is um, is important. And then, I mean, like, I answered the question, so there's not really a need for Plan B, um, but the growth of the network is important, of course, but that's all going to be about how well do we find product market fit for some swarms, and then that's probably going to speak for itself. But yeah, I mean, like definitely we have to invest, and I think our treasury is big enough to do so. So yeah, I hope that clarifies your question. That was the last question I was looking for. I think that were most of the questions that were asked. For the guys that are still on there, it's not many of us as I expected because most of the people are at work. Do you guys have any questions? If so, go ahead and ask.
Hi, Yannick. This is Christoph. Can you hear me?
Oh, hey guys, can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, now I can hear you.
Now, to sum up what you just said, first of all, I think it's really exciting. The possibilities and opportunities that you're providing us. Um, Obviously, I'm a truth seeker, so the, I want to really support the Truth Swarm by building a cluster. I do have an idea for it. How would a cooperation with you guys and your team, how would that um, look? You said we can liaise with you on ideas and concepts, but how would that actually play out in reality, if you know what I mean? Is there an
Yeah,
office that we call, or do we
yeah.
have a chat room? All of that. And then I have another question, but this is the first one.
Okay, let me answer this one first, yeah?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so here's how I'm thinking of it, and we haven't really finalized this yet. But what I was intending to do is create a special portal where anybody could potentially submit their idea, and then have some kind of a voting, like either internally just within the company, or maybe even in the alpha, in the truth seekers chat, and then based off the selection, like go for like three to five, great ideas, and then create a kind of like a, a accelerator program. So where we have like let's say like a few weeks where we flesh things out, where we think really about like the implications of what it could potentially become, what would be the structure of, the agents and the clusters, their responsibility, how will we structure outputs, but then also how are we going to call it, how are we going to brand it, how are we going to like make it something that is just a little bit more than just like a black box, right? Like how are we going to make sure that these these ideas also get some public attention, and maybe it would even be like a swarm, right? Like maybe it's going to be like a swarm that you come up with. Then an important part of, if it's a swarm, and I'd suggest that this would just be for swarm specifically, is that we'd also have to go really deep into like how do we market this thing? How do we bring it to market? If it's going to have its own token, then how are we going to manage that part of the deal in terms of launching it? How are we going to make sure that that goes smoothly and well? So you can kind of think of it as like a accelerator program for the community essentially. So to sum it up a little bit, we'd have like an application, which would be a public application. So we promote it as a program. You just write it out, you submit it. We have voting. We select the top three to five, and then the top three to five is actually going to go through the program with us. Probably it's going to be like a 3 to 4 week program where we have several calls and several sessions, and allow you to get access to some of our internal team members to help you set this whole thing up. And then also, like that at that stage, there should be the possibility for you to already use the tools, so that you can actually, we can actually build it, we can review it together, and so on.
Brilliant. Sounds really fascinating, really. Um, can I ask my second question, please?
Sure, go ahead.
You mentioned the magic word, and that is market or promotion. I've been thinking along the lines of my, you remember my initial project I heard today, setting up a swarm that creates, whatever the various stages of any creative production needed, and be the part of a book or film or whatever. But in my initial conversations with, especially filmmakers, I
Mm-hmm.
realized the first thing one needs to overcome really is um, crypto adoption. No one
Mm.
really so far trusts, oh, crypto? Oh, no, 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 please leave me alone. I really don't want to have to do that. I thought you had another project in mind, but if crypto is involved, nah, thank you. Now the question is, have you considered overcoming the obstacles that lie in the very nature of what we're dealing with here, crypto?
Mm. Yes, I don't want to call it a theory, but I have how would you call it? Yeah, actually we could call it a theory. I have a theory for this, which is that we should abstract away the crypto from the messaging, from the marketing, from the promotion, and allow people to just use it. And if they want to rent, for example, an agent license, you can just use a credit card, and just give them the benefits of the product, like the aspects that are Web3, right? Like what is living on chain and so on. Like give them that security, give them that transparency, but don't really don't really like push it in their face. Not say like, yo, this is crypto, this is Web3, and so on. It's like no, like just focus on the product itself and what kind of benefit it brings to the user, and then kind of like abstract away the crypto part, and then like gradually introduce them to it, right? It's like, hey, by the way, did you know why, like these agents are much more safe than other agents because what's running on the truth protocol, and do you know how it works? Like, do you know how the reputation system works? No, oh, it's actually Web3, it's blockchain, right? Like, once you already have the attention of people and once they already understand the power of your product, and may I remind you that our product is not purely Web3, right? There's actually a lot of Web2 aspects around it. Like a lot of the stack is actually just normal technology, if you will. It's not necessarily like all, everything is happening on a blockchain. No, definitely not. So, so I think, yeah, that, like imagine like, for example, like a booking website that is like a crypto Web3 blockchain based website, but you don't say it's a Web3 booking based website. You have a non-custodial wallet that's automatically created for you, and you can still pay with your credit card, and then your credit, like you top up essentially using your credit card, and it's converted into USDC, your USDT in the background, and you can book hotels. Like people don't even have to know, essentially, right? So I think that is something that I'm very bullish on, because if you think about it, it's like, well, people that are gonna come and try the platform for the first time, like they don't really super necessarily have to understand the whole Web3 ordeal about it, right? They just need to be able to build something really useful through which they can potentially earn some money.
Very brilliant, slick, and elegant. I'm with you, fully understand. And yes, absolutely. Good idea. I'll keep that in mind. Cheers, mate.
Yeah, no, no worries, no worries. Yeah. I see Mr. Furley also posted some questions. I'm gonna read them out and I will answer them. Multiple X accounts and credits. If we get credit for using Rollup News on X, does that credit apply across multiple X accounts? Do we need to stick to one single account? It depends on you, man. It's like if you use multiple accounts to request multiple rollups on different accounts, and later on you can just claim on both accounts because you own the account. So the way it works is you can go to the claim portal, you log in using your X account that you used, and then you can claim those points. So if you have two accounts, you would just do it twice. Credit tracking start date. When does the system start tracking usage of credits? Today. Well, actually, it did. It's actually started from the day we launched Rollup News. So it's already live. It's tracking right now. So the more rollups you do, the more credit you get. Retroactive credits will the credits be applied for any rollup news usage we've already done? Yes, correct. Only new usage. All. So it actually I want to note that it's like literally from the start of like the first day that we made rollup available, and I'm in the top three, I think. No, top five. I wasn't even in the top three, top five.
Where do we pick
So if you
the top posters there that you just mentioned?
who they are?
Yeah, like you said, you're in the top three. Where do we check the list of top people in the
Yeah, so
roles?
so you cannot check it yet. It's gonna be available once we publish the new version of Rollup. It's gonna be on the homepage. There will be like a dedicated section for the leaderboard. But I might be able to get one of the devs to send it over and share it later. I'm not sure. I'll check, but it will be available on the homepage of Rollup. So it will have its own unique domains like rollup.news, and everything will be there, and the portal and so on will be there as well. Post effectiveness and sources. What types of X posts are most effective for rollup news checks? Sometimes only a few sources appear, while other times many reputable references show up. Are there recommended post formats or criteria that make the rollup feature more successful? Yes. The more context, the better. Right now, for example, a video is not supported and images don't always work. But on the next version, like you can analyze video and you can analyze images as well. But it works well on threads. So if there's more information in text format, it will work better. But if I see some people roll up some like shitty like Web3 crypto announcement, that kind of stuff, like definitely not going to work very well. Threads work really well. Threads are like my favorite thing to roll up is actually a thread because there's usually so much information that I don't really want to go through the trouble to either reading it all or kind of like assessing it all. I just want to have like a quick digest. So I usually roll up threads, and then like for threads, it doesn't really matter. I would say just as the more information there is in terms of text, and the more clearly that information is presented, like the more clear the claims are, and if there are like any claims at all. Sometimes somebody writes a story on X and it's not really worth fact checking, right? So you also need to make sure that there's actually something worth in it to be fact checked. Then it works well. But coming to that, we will definitely be looking at the quality of the thing that you roll up. So if you're just gonna like spam roll ups on like random, like I don't know, random Binance posts or something like that, like the points you're gonna get is gonna be much lower compared to if you are going to roll up threads by some very interesting, political commentator or some very, like super developer in Web3 that's writing about new concepts and so on. So yeah, like the quality of the things that you're rolling up um do influence the amount of points or the amount of credits you're gonna get. So
Yeah, I was
adapting,
experimenting with different things to do the roll up feature on. I was purposely trying to do them on things that had very little information, different
yeah,
subjects, just testing what results I got. It was pretty fun to go through.
yeah, exactly, yeah, indeed, yeah. I also tested it on some pretty shitty posts and it just didn't do really well. But yeah,
So
and the next version is gonna be really cool though because you can literally like if there's like a 20-minute video, you just roll up and then it analyzes the whole video for you. It's super neat.
it's awesome.
Yeah. So the
So
next question is about AI technology is evolving quickly. Will the roll-up news feature and related systems adapt to incorporate new AI tools models as they emerge? Yes. Definitely, because like the whole point about Rollup is that it's powered by the Truth Swarm, and the Truth Swarm is a dynamic thing. So we can create new clusters, we can reconfigure clusters, we can add new tools, and so on. So it's built so that it's not static. Like on the next version, you'll be able to swap clusters too, so you can see the different results and the different reasoning that's being done by different types of configurations. That also means that, you know, maybe we'll use like a certain vision model for uh, like a certain like cluster or swarm, and then another for another, and then you can compare those two together. Like there's already this thing going on of like iteration and upgradability and so on.
so say you wanted to make an upgrade to your swarm or your cluster, how quickly is it implemented once you make that change? Like how long is that process going to take?
It literally can be instantaneous, like as soon as you're happy with the configuration. And again, like this can be done just through natural language. You can just essentially say, okay, this is the configuration that I'm looking for, and you can you can just say, okay, this is what I'm moving forward with from now on. So it really depends on what you need, right? Like if it's something very complex, you have to iterate it. But what is important is you have to be confident of its performance, of course.
Well, I would imagine it would probably be a good idea to use AI itself to help you create the things that you ask the swarms to do. I mean, that's how I'm going to be
Yeah,
looking at it. That's amazing.
yeah, yes, correct. So your next question is how is Swarm Network planning on leveraging advanced SUI capabilities like Walrus for data storage or other in-house SUI offerings? Could you share any examples of how these might be integrated into the ecosystem, particularly with the roll-up news feature? Yeah. And then later on, when we have access to the builder program to build our own clusters and so on. Yeah. So we're gonna be natively integrating with a lot of the things on SUI. So for example, storage like Walrus, indeed, not only for like data but also prompt information. So um, I don't want to talk too much about the specifics because it's relatively technical, but I do want to announce something. Hold up, I just gotta swap to charger real quick because my phone is gonna die.
Yeah, and this is like the most important question for me because I'm a very big
Um,
advocate of SWE. So really interested in this part.
yeah. So I can tell you guys something which is cool. Like we're gonna be part of the SUI Hub. So we're gonna be working with SUI Foundation directly to integrate all of these upcoming protocols and so on. So like Walrus, for example. So along the way, I'll be able to share a lot more information regarding this.
Would you be able to say who you have spoken with Mission Labs? Because I'm actually in contact with quite a few of them.
Um, Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I'm wondering who specifically have you spoken with at Miston Labs? Because I'm in contact with quite a few of them. I'm seeing if there was anyone in particular that you could name, or is that still um, confidential?
Yeah, I don't think it's very relevant right now, but for example, John Nolte, like we've spoken to John a lot. But yeah, like we will have an announce sorry, announcement on Sui Hub and so on, like once we finalize all the contract terms. But it will be very nice, man, because like we'll get access to a lot of support channels through Sui, which is very cool. But yeah, everything at its time. Like we cannot say too much at this stage. But it's gonna be pretty wild.
I definitely recommend everyone following Adani, which is at Aman Abio, because has definitely a lot of the most alpha information about the SWE network. And he's also the one that's on the majority of the interviews on YouTube, like with Corn Bureau and a lot of other ones that I've even shared in the Truth Chat. So he's a great person to follow for information about the SWE network.
Yeah, and he's also leading a lot of the conversations between different parties. Like for example, we've also spoken to him in relationship to Walrus and so on. So yeah. Um yeah, guys, I hope that like all of your questions have been answered. If there are more questions, then obviously feel free to post them into the group chat. I will do my best to try and. Yeah, yeah,
I
sure, go
had
ahead.
I
Someone
had
asked
the
how we will monitor, I mean, how we will track which one use how much roll up means how much they contribute and for how much allocations, I mean, airdrop they will get.
Yeah.
Someone
So
asked
we will have a
that.
Yeah, so we will have a dedicated portal for this. So once Rollup News, the new version goes live, there's going to be a portal for this. So you will be able to see how many points you will have in comparison to other people. And based off that, you could practically calculate your weight of the pool. And you could kind of like estimate how many tokens you would potentially be able to get. But until pre TGE, so like very shortly before TGE, you will not actually be able to exactly know how many tokens you'll get, but like once you trade your points or your
Yeah,
credits for tokens, then you will know.
yeah, allocation can't be revealed.
Yes,
And one
yes.
more question is someone also wrote a question like Grok, as we see in Grok also same working like roll up. So in future, what will be difference between Grok and our Swarm cluster?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't really hear it well.
Yes, sure. Someone asked if Grok is also doing same thing which our roll up working means it's like working both are working on same type of things, but in future what will be difference between both because Grok also doing same thing as roll up.
Grok is doing the same thing as Rollup, you mean?
Yeah, but in future, what will be difference between both?
Yeah, so I mean,
Maybe.
Grok is just a large language model, right? So there's no specific there's no specific configuration of Grok that tells it to be, more accurate in, for example, like verify certain types of claims, or being able to analyze video, right? Is not able to do that, or even like take images into context. So the difference is that you, as like Rollup News, for example, the Truth Swarm that's powering Rollup News has a very specific configuration, and there's many steps in the process, and that defines the way that information is propagated and eventually returned. So, like Grok is not built for um for for analysis of claims on X. And actually, if you look at how Grok is being used right now, like if you actually ask Grok to verify something on X, like 9 out of 10 times it's gonna be either hallucinating or just straight up wrong. And I think that's actually posing a very big problem. So there's no, there's no checks in place to prevent Grok from hallucinating or trying to make it more accurate and doing specifically that, which is like the verification of claims. So what is the difference is that you're describing Grok, but Grok is just a large language model, right? And I'm describing Rollup News, which is a specifically configured swarm for exactly one purpose, which is verifying claims. So it's going to be especially good at that, right? So also as information becomes more complex and so on, data sources are going to be added. Like data sources that obviously Grok doesn't have access to. There's human in the mix element. There's like the on-chain, the protocol, the reputation, the rewards for the work that's being done. Like all of that is obviously not possible with Grok. I mean, you could use Grok as a base model. We could swap out some agents, like instead of using, like Llama or DeepSeek, you could have them use Grok for sure. But I think that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you guys very much for joining. I have to jump off to another meeting. Again, if there's any other questions that you guys have, feel free to drop them into the group chat, and I'll try and answer them duly.
Before go, you please off the recording so that we can
Okay.
share in the group. You
Okay,
can
okay,
find
Yeah,
in
yes.
it will be
your tagged
available
message.
once the call is over.
Okay,
Once the
so
call is
I
over,
must
it'll be
click
available.
stop recording, right?
Yeah, you can find
Yeah,
it
and then it will
from
be in your
the
saved. It'll be in your saved
yeah, saved
messages.
message.
It might take
Yeah,
like
right.
5 minutes sometimes, but it'll be there. And then you just have to
Oh,
forward that to the chat.
okay. Awesome. All right, thanks guys. Appreciate everybody for joining today.
Right on. Thanks, buddy.
Awesome.